So he's the Democrat senator who marches to the beat of his own drum on Capitol Hill. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman unapologetic about voting with Republicans 15 times to get the government up and running.
Bernie Sanders said the vote was a horrific mistake. Governor Gavin Newsom called it pathetic and a surrender. Poll after poll found more Americans on both sides of the aisle blaming Republicans.
I don't need a lecture from whether it's Bernie or the governor in California, because they are representing very deep blue kinds of populations. I'm going to cite one of the new governor-elects saying that my election is not a green light to continue this shutdown, because I promise you this isn't a political game.
He has talked. Laura Trump joins me now, host of My View with Laura Trump. Laura, great to have you with us. You know, he was mixing it up there with Sunny Hostin. A lot of hostility on the part of some Democrats and liberals against John Fetterman. They do not like that he speaks out, and he's obviously in a very important state.
Yeah, well, it's so refreshing, Martha, to see that there is someone like John Fetterman out there, a politician who does the right thing, regardless of the pressure he feels from his own party, or, you know, a TV host like Sunny Hostin. They're getting aggressive with him as well. He reminds me of someone else I know. His name is Donald J. Trump. This is what people love. They love authenticity, and they love someone who is willing to stand up and fight for the right things. And you're right, John Fetterman voted every single time with Republicans to reopen the government, to fund the government. When I sat down with him for an interview for my show, he talked about the fact that he doesn't ever agree, no matter who's at fault, with shutting down the government. Look at the havoc that it wreaked across our country. Look at the flights right now. Look at the fact that you have, you know, people who rely on government's assistance who haven't been able to get SNAP benefits, et cetera. They would rather make a political play on the left and you know, make it hurt the entire country than do something that is right. And I think it's really nice that you have John Fetterman out there, who one time, Martha, we all looked at and said, he's kind of fringe, he's kind of far left. He's now the most common sense in the Democrat Party, and how refreshing it is that he's continuing to be that way.
You know, it is so interesting, and I think it was really a life lesson for all of us who covered his stroke and who raised questions that I think were legitimate at the time. In fact, he even said, as part of his book tour coverage, that maybe he should have dropped out. But he was resilient in such a truly American, courageous fighter way. And he talks here about, this was in the interview that you did with him, about the personal impact on him of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the attempted assassination that happened in his own state of your father-in-law. Watch.
After the tragedy with Charlie Kirk, people deserve to be able to grieve, and the appropriate space to grieve and acknowledge the horror of what happened. Pennsylvania, that's where the president was also shot. And now I was 30 miles away. Imagine where our nation would be if that could have gone in that same way.
You know, he does have a humanity and an authenticity to him. And he also relates to, I think, the working class of America, Laura, which raises questions about him politically. Whether or not, you know, he might lean more towards becoming a Republican or an independent. I asked him this question about whether or not he would ever run for president. Watch this.
2028 is a long time. It's far away. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? And so where I'm at right now, it's like I've been very, very unapologetically a supporter of Israel. And I believe in a secure our border. And I believe it's wrong to shut our government down. And that may have put me at odds with parts of my base.
You know, do you think he is someone, if he stays a Democrat, Laura, who could pull away some of those working class voters who have gravitated to Donald Trump, President Donald Trump's Republican Party?
Well, I would say John Fetterman has a lot more in common with Donald Trump right now than he does with most in his own party. And
like
so, you know, he is a bit of a unique individual in that way. What I would advise the Democrats, not that I'm in the place of giving them advice, if you want to win anyone back into your party that has left, you ought to start acting more like John Fetterman. It's common sense. It's what the American people want to see. And it's putting country above party. And we're grateful for that.
Yep. Well, he left the door open on the 2028 question. So always room for things to get interesting. Laura, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.